just me, or is that kind of a tall order? Be perfect? And then, just in case we weren't sure just how high Jesus is setting the bar, he tells us explicitly what his standard of conduct is. Not the best we can do, but rather the eternal and transcendent perfection of God. Some of the earlier teachings Jesus had given in the Sermon on the Mount are hard enough to accept, like loving your enemies, or never letting yourself become consumed by anger, lust, or pride. But when his audience heard Jesus tell them that they have to be as perfect as God, they must have thought the sermon was a long, elaborate joke. Well, Jesus did have a keen sense of humor. He was Jewish, after all. These words are no joke. But there is more to them than our translation lets on. The word that is translated perfect is the Greek word telos, which is used to describe something not so much morally perfect as something that has grown up, matured, and now reached its perfect end. That is, telos is the goal or desired outcome of a thing. The sense of the word is more about becoming what was intended, accomplishing one's God-given purpose in the same way that God constantly reflects God's own nature and purpose. A fruit tree's telos, we might say, is to grow mature and tall so that it can bear fruit. So a commandment to grow into the mature apostles God calls us to be is a little easier to accept. But Jesus is still insisting that we aren't there yet. Our thirst for revenge can feel satisfying, even righteous. It can also destroy us. But its more subtle effect is that of distracting us from Jesus, turning our gaze from him, and with it, our hearts. As such, we end up replacing his perfect justice with our own deeply flawed, skewed, self-centered sense of right and wrong. We are too quick to make enemies and lash out at them, too comfortable in our insulation from those different from us, too smug in our dismissal of entire categories of other people, and we are far too reluctant to step up and respond to the needs of the world, even when we know we are more than capable of doing so. Jesus is really taking that instruction we just heard from Leviticus, "You shall reprove your neighbor or you will incur guilt yourself," and running with it. But the purpose of that commandment is explained in the very next sentence. "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." The idea is that God is working with us to increase the grace in the world. But it is work, hard work. Like everyone else preaching on this passage this morning, I tell you that obeying these teachings is extraordinarily difficult. Rather than something we must accomplish now or else dismiss as beyond our reach, we can look at Jesus' teachings as our life's work, a challenge worthy of our aspirations and best efforts. Like Jesus himself, his teachings are our companions on our journey to the kingdom of God. And like Jesus himself, they are a powerful means of grace. So rather than dwelling on our inevitable departures from Jesus' standards, consider our moments of triumph. One memory that will always stay with me was a time when I offered an olive branch of hospitality to a man I considered a bitter enemy. He accepted and revealed a glimpse of desperate loneliness and genuine gratitude. Unfortunately, he didn't say anything I could use against him. And he went right back to being an insufferable jerk after that. But I never set out to change him. In fact, I still consider him my enemy. And I'm still glad I offer him a moment of Christian love. I'm glad in part because I could prove to myself that I am capable of such a gesture. And tell myself I'm better than him. And have a decent example to share in a sermon. I'm glad that I made a stride toward my telos and grew into a more mature Christian. More than that, though, I'm glad for what Jesus accomplished in a brief moment in which I got over myself and gave Jesus a chance to do things his way. Jesus used the opportunity in a predictable way. He brought a flood of grace into the world through a tiny crack in my self-absorption. Every time we answer Jesus' call and obey his teachings in spite of ourselves, Jesus' grace flows through us, and we show the world his face like a lightning strike. Amen.